Hello my friends, in today's video we're talking about writing. And writing is important because there's a common misconception that you can make e-learning more engaging and effective just by throwing in more interactions and more animation and more visuals, but the words that we use can actually have a bigger impact than all of these things. So in this video we're going to explore 5 writing tips that can help you improve your instructional design and e-learning skills. So before becoming an instructional designer, I was a writer. I was an English major and I spent most of my time writing research papers, writing my thesis, and I even tried my hand at poetry and short fiction and even a novel that I started and didn't finish. So writing was probably my most developed instructional design skill when I was just getting into the field, and it was still difficult to get out of that formal academic type of writing and learn how to write for adults who are out there in the world doing their jobs or looking for content on Google or reading content on social media. So with some of those tips that I've picked up along the way, as well as all of the common mistakes that I've seen, because I spend a lot of my time reviewing storyboards, reviewing people's write-ups for their websites to help improve them. So I see the common mistakes that people make, and I think that these tips that I've included here will help a lot of people improve their writing skills. So let's dive right into it here. These are the 5 tips. You may have heard of some of them before, but I've also included plenty of examples and even some quizzing. If you want to quiz yourself, we have some questions incorporated throughout. But we're going to look at how to use a conversational tone, use the active voice, show, don't tell, use commas correctly, and use simpler language. So we're diving into all of these things. We'll do it one at a time, and we have examples for each. So the first tip, you may have heard this before, we want to use a conversational tone when we're designing learning experiences, and the reason for this is because of the personalization principle. So this is science-backed, it's one of Mayer's principles. Check out my video on that if you haven't seen it already. But the principle states that people learn better from a conversational tone than they do from a formal or academic tone. Okay, so we want to write like we speak. And if you're writing for a character, write like that character would speak. And a good way to test for this is to read what you've written out loud and see how it sounds. If it sounds like something someone would say, then it probably passes this test. So now it's quiz time, and this is the format. We'll look at the bullet points for the principle or the tip, and then we'll dive right into it and see if you can put it to the test. Okay, so in Customer Service 101, you will learn how to successfully de-escalate situations with irate customers. Do you think that this is using a conversational tone? Pause it if you need to, but it's not. We can do a better job here. And my rewrite for this one is, welcome to Customer Service 101. Ready to learn how to calm down angry customers? Let's get started. Okay, so that sounds like maybe a trainer who's in the room with us leading a session. That sounds like something that they might say. Doesn't sound like they're reading off of a sheet of paper. And that's the goal here. And you'll see that some of these tips overlap. So I changed some of the language. We have like the more conversational piece like welcome to and let's get started, but I also swapped out irate with angry, and I swapped out de-escalate with calm down. So you'll see a lot of these tips work in conjunction with each other, and you'll get what I mean when we dive into some more of these. So here's another one. I'm your mentor, Marvin. I'm an experienced instructional designer with 12 years of experience. Please reach out to me if you need assistance. Is this using a conversational tone? So while it does sound like someone is saying this to us, right? I'm your mentor, Marvin. It is not using a conversational tone. It can do a better job. And my rewrite is this. Hi, I'm Marvin. I've been an instructional designer for a while, so just let me know if you need help. Right, that sounds a little more than I am an experienced instructional designer with 12 years of experience, right? So something to watch for when you are writing dialogue, especially make it sound like something someone would actually say, but if you can use this for all of the copy in your learning experiences, even better. Okay, let's move on to tip number 2, which is to use the active voice. Very, very common mistake. Some people don't even know to watch for this, but if you're gonna do one thing to improve your writing skills, this is the best thing that you can do. It will just make your writing so much clearer, and that's what this is all about, right? Making things clear and engaging. Okay, so the active voice is when the subject performs the action. So Susie kicked the ball. Susie is the subject. Kicked is obviously the verb. Susie kicks the ball. Very easy to picture that. Now the passive voice, which a lot of people use naturally without even realizing it, is when the subject receives the action. So the ball now is the subject. The ball was kicked. So now the ball is getting acted upon instead of a subject taking an action. And it might not seem really drastic here, but in longer sentences or sentences with more confusing language, it can get very confusing very fast if you're using the passive voice. It's much harder to follow, and it generally leads to longer sentences that are less clear and less concise. So this is worth your time to practice with, and we're going to look at some sentences here, but if this is new to you, look this up, research it, and just practice, even revising your past writing, because this skill will pay off very nicely. And yeah, once again, easier to follow sentences written in the active voice. Okay, so let's get some practice in here. The eLearning was designed by Devlin. Is this in the active voice? The answer is no. We just looked at this. The better way to write this would be Devlin designed this eLearning. So now Devlin is the subject, Devlin is taking the action, and we're acting upon the eLearning. So there we go, that's in the simplest form. Let's look at another one. We wanted to release the new product, but we were told by the learning team not to launch. Is this in the active voice? So the first clause here is, we wanted to release the new product, but the second clause is not. We were told by. So we are receiving an action instead of acting. The way to put this into the active voice would be, we wanted to release the new product, but the learning team told us not to launch. So now the learning team, the subject, is taking the action. They told us. So there we go. That's how we switch those around to put it in the active voice. Research that further if you haven't. It's the most important one on this list, I would say. Well, actually, I don't know, all of these are important, but it is important. So research it if you need to. Tip number 3 is show, don't tell. You may have heard this. It's classic writing advice, but we'll look at some examples here. The idea is to show us which actions people perform instead of telling us about their internal states or emotions. That's the classic advice, but an eLearning specific way to use this principle is to show us what people are saying instead of telling us a summary. And I see people do this a lot. They'll say, so-and-so said not to do this. But instead, you can put that character on the screen, you can show us a speech bubble of what they're saying, and it just makes that experience much more engaging for our audience. And we'll look at some examples. Quiz time, of course. Susan stood up abruptly and left the room, slamming the door behind her. Are we showing here or are we telling? So in this case, we're showing, right? We could have just said, Susan was angry, or Susan felt angry after he made that comment. But instead, we are showing what Susan did. She stood up abruptly and left the room. Maybe we heard the chair screech across the floor when she stood, and she slams the door behind her. We can tell from that Susan probably isn't too happy, but we didn't have to write Susan's unhappy. So if you can think of which actions people would take, or what expressions, not even expressions, but where will their gaze go? What will they do when they're in that emotional state? What will they say? These are the things that you want to show to your audience instead of just saying what emotion they feel. Let's look at another example. You made the hiring manager uncomfortable because you said that your favorite part of the job is the compensation. Okay, so we're in an interview. We say that. Are we showing or telling? We are telling in this case. So this is not the correct option. For this one, I included a screenshot from an eLearning project in the project lab. Some of you may be familiar with this, but this is what I mean. We bring the character onto the screen, we show the speech bubble, and the character says, okay, we haven't even discussed compensation yet though. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So you can see we're using the conversational tone here, but we're seeing the dialogue. Instead of just saying, you made the hiring manager uncomfortable, we're actually seeing what the hiring manager says in response to the choice we just made, or because of the action we just took. Okay, so let's move right along to tip number 4 here, which is to use commas correctly. And there are many comma rules. We're definitely not going to get into all of them here, but the one we will focus on, because this is a very common mistake, is to use a comma with the conjunction when you're separating two independent clauses. Okay, so sometimes people don't include this comma at all, and sometimes people include this comma with the conjunction when it's not necessary. So if you're not familiar with what an independent clause is, it's independent if it can stand on its own as a sentence. So if you were to split the sentence where the and is, and you take the first part and the second part, and they both have a subject and a verb and can stand on their own, then you need a comma after the conjunction. And we'll look at some examples if these terms may not be familiar to you. Of course, other comma rules, if you are rusty on them, I would suggest researching them and practicing them just to make sure your sentences are as clear as possible. But let's do the quiz time for the independent clause one. So your job here, once again, is to tell us if this sentence needs a comma. So they published the e-learning and then clocked out. We do not need a comma here. This is perfectly fine because then clocked out, that does not stand on its own as a sentence. And because of that, we do not need a comma. So let's take a look at the next one. They reviewed the e-learning slides for hours and deleted every slide that had an error on it. Does this need a comma added or does it need a comma removed? Or is it good as is? I can tell you it is not good as is because we need to remove the comma. Because if you see here, and deleted every slide that had an error on it, that's not a sentence because there's no subject. Who deleted every slide? Right? So we have two options for this one. So we could, if we wanted to keep the comma, we could just add the subject to that second clause. So they reviewed the e-learning slides for hours and they deleted every slide that had an error on it. Now they deleted every slide that had an error on it. That stands on its own. So this is a perfectly valid sentence. We can include the comma. The other option is to just delete the comma. They reviewed the e-learning slides for hours and deleted every slide that had an error on it. That sentence is correct because the second clause is a dependent clause, not an independent clause. So research that further if that was confusing, but it will be very good to know how and when to use this comma. Oh, here's another. The marketing team wrote the copy and the design team provided the graphics. In this case, we do need a comma. So because the marketing team wrote the copy stands on its own and the design team provided the graphics stands on its own, we do need a comma before that conjunction. And if I said earlier comma after the conjunction, I don't know if I said that, obviously, yeah, the comma comes before it. So sorry about any possible confusion there if I misspoke. Okay, moving right along to tip number 5, which is to use simple language. And this just goes across the board. You've seen me kind of weave this into some of the earlier tips, but simplify your language, right? Write for a middle school reading level. That's the general rule of thumb. So write for people that are like 11 to 13 years old. Try to use that level of vocab, that complexity of sentence structure. If you're coming from academia or you're most comfortable writing academic papers, then this is going to be a very difficult thing to adjust to. Because in academia, writing that like flowery language with big words and long, technically, grammatically correct sentences, like that kind of stuff is like rewarded in academia, right? It's kind of part of the job to sift through some dense text. And I have seen academic articles that are written by people who use this, and they just stand out through the noise so much. So this, very good skill to practice. Don't use big words or technical jargon. Of course, for some type of learning experiences, for very technical training, it is, we'll have to use some technical jargon. But as long as your audience is comfortable with it and you're not using it just for the sake of using it, it will be good to keep it simpler. And then write short, simple sentences. So the simple language, this goes for the words that you're using as well as the sentence structure. So let's get some practice with this. Okay, this is the optimal approach for writing copy. Is this using this simple language principle or could the language be made simpler? I will tell you, this language could be made simpler. And if you're going to practice doing any of these, I would suggest practice rewriting the ones in this section. I said earlier, one of the other tips was the most important, but this one is very important too. So how would we rewrite this? Pause this if you need to. Here is the reveal. This is the best way to write. Okay, so instead of optimal approach, we said best way. And instead of for writing copy, we can just say to write. So you can see this is fun when you do this exercise like on your own writing. It is a worthwhile exercise to do. Practicing this skill will pay off a ton, whether you're writing for your website or writing for a global audience on your e-learning courses. Okay, people do not enjoy the extended lecture format, so you should revise your technique. Probably easy to tell that this one is not using simple language, so it could use an adjustment. Go ahead and try to rewrite this one yourself. I highly encourage you to, even if you spend 30 seconds on it. But here is the reveal. Pause if you need to. People don't like long lectures. You should try something else. So instead of people do not enjoy the extended lecture format, we just say people do not like long lectures. And then instead of you should revise your technique, we just say you should try something else. So once again, you can see how the use simple language and use a conversational tone, those two kind of go hand in hand. Because usually when you are making the tone more conversational, you're naturally making it simpler, and the inverse holds as well. So there we have it. That is all I have for you today. But if you would like to continue improving your instructional design and e-learning skills with me, then please check out my full YouTube video on how to design effective e-learning. It's 47 minutes long. I packed it with as much value as I could, and it gets into some writing tips, particularly around writing storyboards for e-learning. So if you haven't seen that video yet, please check it out. It's here on YouTube, and I'll link it in the comments, the description, and the top right of the screen. So I'll make it very easy to find. And if you have already seen it, then no worries. There is a lot more content like this to come, and I will see you in the next video.